Ben, thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you on board. I'd love for you to just start off, tell us your background. You have a really interesting culinary background, entrepreneurial background. Similar to myself, you created a burger truck at 18. You also did some sort of nonprofit that involved making pizza out of your apartment. And you also have a background in tech and consulting. So would love to hear about all of those different things.
Well, thanks for having me. And culinary background is probably being generous, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I tell folks I did my corporate years in management consulting, went to business school, and did some time at Amazon and operations and logistics, but always thought about myself as a food entrepreneur. And that experience goes back to childhood. It just comes from being obsessed with food and family meals and being in the kitchen with my mom growing up. When I was 18, I opened a food truck with one of my best friends in the world up at home in Portland, Maine. The company was called Mainly Burgers, and we grew that company together to 3 trucks, and we had 16 employees, and we got to be on the Food Network. And I exited that business in 2014 while I was still in college. And then during business school, I found myself running this sort of crazy pizza pop-up nonprofit out of my apartment. I was making a lot of pizza during business school, mostly for the joy of cooking for people again and the intellectual exercise of trying to figure out dough fermentation, and started to make 20 homemade pizzas a week and lower them out my window on a pulley system to raise money for hunger relief during the pandemic. Started making these 20 pizzas and offering them up on a lottery system to anyone who might want them, saying, pizza's free. If you want to donate, that's great. We'll give every penny away. And it took off during the pandemic. I ended up on The Ellen Show, at Good Morning America, and Barstool, and Today Show, and Food and Wine Magazine. Raised 6 digits for hunger relief in Philadelphia, and then donated the whole entity to Philadelphia's largest hunger relief organization, Phil Abundance, where it's now the entrepreneurship program for low to no income individuals.
Awesome. Just a quick aside. It's really quiet, so if you could get closer to your mic and just maybe project a little bit more, that would be super helpful.
Sure, no problem.
Really great stuff. I had a legal burger pop up that was out of the Radian on 39th and Walnut. That was operating over text message. It was circa 2009 or so.
I can only imagine. I don't know if I've told this story before, but when Good Pizza, which was my pizza nonprofit, which was not actually incorporated as a nonprofit, when it was sort of starting to move quickly, I got on the phone with some lawyers who offered to help for free because I liked what we were doing, which is amazing of them. And we started to work through the issues. And one of the issues is they said, hey, like the call went in and said, I think everything's fine. You should be all right. There's a chance the health department shuts you down, but pandemic, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Like, you don't seem to be hurting anyone. Pizza's pretty safe. I said, the issue is there's a chance they might come after you as an illegal gambling ring. And that would be really bad. I said, what? How could it begin? And the issue was, I was putting these lotteries up I was putting the pizzas up in a lottery on Wednesdays. And so people were entering the quote unquote lottery and then being selected at the end of it. And then even though they weren't paying money into the lottery system, you weren't buying tickets, you were donating to the entity and then giving it away. And there was concern from the lawyers that if someone really wanted to, you could make a claim that this was a gambling ring. And so we made some changes to make sure that I was safe in that regard.
I don't know. I'm no lawyer, no expert, but I feel like they missed the forest for the trees on that one. But that's just mine. There's a lot that can go wrong with the dairy and how you're storing that. And
sure,
we'll save that for another podcast. But I'd love to hear. That's really great stuff. I can't say my pop-up was that as successful as that. I didn't make it onto the Ellen Show. I did make it in the Philly Inquirer.
There you go.
But anyway, I digress. How did you go from this to I guess, incubating at the Salt Fund? What is the Salt Fund? Does that involve the mooch? And then from there, how did you start Tomorrow Farms?
The Salt Fund is a small venture fund, actually much larger now. But at the time was a new venture fund started by Anthony Scaramucci, son, AJ Scaramucci, and Alex Klokas, who are two close friends, both of whom I love dearly. And I was in business school at the time with my return offer to go back to consulting, which seemed like a safe and generally good bet to be making at the time. And AJ, who's been a friend since early college years, sort of said, I think you should come explore with us and see if you might want to build. We've raised this fund. We have some dollars to incubate. I think you'd make a great founder in our portfolio. And took a bet on me in some ways to that end. I think business school for me was largely an experience of figuring out what my unique skills were, sort of realizing in business school that my classmates really liked consulting. They really liked private equity. And I never enjoyed the intellectual exercise that came with those. I wanted to be building. I wanted to be figuring things out. I wanted to be breaking things. I wanted to be moving quickly. And they were sort of looking at things like the pizza nonprofit saying like, what are you trying to do here? Why can't you just focus on this, mid-cap leverage buyout, fake one, by the way, that we're doing in class. And so I think business school was a chance to say, oh, my skills might be more unique than I realized that they were. And the things that I don't enjoy doing, I don't have to do them forever, like, being an analyst in consulting. And so I joined Alex and AJ at the SALT Fund as an entrepreneur in residence, investing broadly in the quote-unquote future of food platforms for precision fermentation and recombinant proteins and cell-based meat production. Amazing companies that, as someone who loves food as much as I do, it felt like they were building the sort of platforms that could make sure my grandkids could eat the foods that I love. That was sort of my verdict on the space. And yet there was clearly a missing layer to the ecosystem. All of the companies that we were talking to were pitching themselves as picks and shovels, railroad tracks, Intel Inside, and they seemed to be bottlenecked by lack of commercial infrastructure, commercial products and brands sitting on top of that. I think they all had a thesis that they would be able to sell into the General Mills and the Unilevers of the world, but nobody had solved for that equation yet. And so the first inkling of idea of what became Tomorrow Farms was, well, what if you set up a company that was specifically focused on the consumer side of this equation? What if you sort of broke this space down, as other industries have done, and you let deep tech food science focus on the deep tech part of their side and have someone else focus on the consumer equation from the ground up.
Awesome. So you give us the full pitch. You have kind of two sides of this, right? What's the pitch to the consumer, and then what's the pitch to kind of the hard tech ingredient partners, and then maybe talk a little bit more about the job to be done, the void you're filling within those spaces.
Yeah, two sides to this, as you mentioned. One is, everything that we do has to be in service of great products and brands, right? Like we don't do anything unless we create products and brands that people love. Our nuance there is that we are very intentionally putting a stake in the ground, building our products around the next generation of amazing and innovative food ingredients. And so one side of this platform is consumer focused, and it says we're going to build sort of ubiquitous, hopefully one day, products and brands that reinvent our favorite foods. And we're going to get unbelievably good at manufacturing, freight, fulfillment, supply chain, creative and brand building, retail sales and marketing. We're going to know how to take something like fermentation-derived whey, make it into the world's first animal-free dairy milk, and sell it in grocery stores and coffee shops around the world. That's one side, is can we build a portfolio of amazing products and brands that really progress the entire future of food? And we believe that if we do that, we end up helping the entire sort of food tech space, right? Like you're solving for the consumer adoption for so many of these amazing ingredients that are coming to market right now. Now, we also believe that the only way to do that successfully is to work really closely with those deep tech food science companies. And so the other sort of growing part of our business is this enterprise platform that actually works with deep tech food science companies to help them literally solve the consumer equation, right? That says, we at Tomorrow Farms know how to harness those ingredients and put them into real products. If you're making fermentation-derived whey, if you're building upcycled ingredients, cultivated proteins, new textured proteins, flavor systems, etc., we're going to sort of build the platform that allows you to get that into a product and brand that customers are going to love. And thinking about how we can solve for that core sort of commercial constraint that a lot of deep tech food science companies face.
It's fascinating. So, like, yeah, and you see this playing out right now with some of these companies that have raised a lot of money, and maybe they're having some issues, with their go-to-market strategy. I just think let's dive in a little bit more. Why is it
Yep.
so hard to do both simultaneously? Develop a novel platform, develop a novel technology, right? And also commercialize it and go to market with it. I mean, the biggest multinational CPG companies do this already, right? They have some food science in house. They have,
Yep.
Obviously a lot of commercial expertise when it comes to selling their products and relationships. But why is it so hard for startups to do both and walk and chew gum here?
Yeah, there's three reasons that we sort of talk about a lot and have validated via our conversations and relationships with these deep tech food science companies. The first is that it's just a completely different set of capabilities. If you're building something like a precision fermentation company, up until the point that you're ready to launch a product, up until the point that you're ready to launch a brand, you're focused on building capacity for precision fermentation. You're hiring scientists and PhDs. You're hiring downstream processing engineers. Once you start to step into the product and brand side of things, now you need to hire retail marketers, brand managers, social media managers, supply chain experts, and all of these other capabilities that we just believe is simply a different company than what you had been previously been building. And so that's what. It's just an underestimated challenge for a lot of deep tech food science companies that says there's not a lot of overlap between what your people have done for the last 5, 6, 10 years of growing your amazing company and what now you're being tasked with having to solve for if you decide to sort of vertically integrate here and take on the consumer challenge. 2, a lot of these companies, as they begin getting ready to commercialize, they're being evaluated against their ability to sell their novel ingredient or protein. The problem with standing up your own consumer arm is no matter how good your accountants are, it's often really difficult to sell your ingredient to yourself. You need external validation points, external proof points, and basically external customers to be buying this product from you to incorporate in their products and ingredients. And so that's the second challenge that we see. The third challenge that we see is that it just changes how the market sees you as a company. A lot of deep tech food science companies that we talk to, as you point out, have raised a lot of dollars at very high valuations because they are and should be science companies. They're focused on scientific breakthrough. They have the chance to transform our food systems at broad scale across every product in the grocery store. And that's amazing. Problem is, as soon as you decide to launch your own product, you're now being evaluated as if you're a CPG company, which comes with a whole host of other sort of macroeconomic and investor challenges. And now you're having to catch up to the valuation that you set when you were purely a scientific company by selling a lot of product in grocery stores. And we will say this whole space should be focused on what they do best. If you're a deep tech food science company, focus on driving down the cost of your ingredients to get to wide scale adoption. Focus on the capacity challenge to build your scaling plot. Focus on all of that and let somebody else, mainly Tomorrow Farms, worry about making amazing products and brands and selling them to customers.
Really fascinating. Yeah. And I think we're starting to see this, and I guess we'll get into this, but obviously like Corn has started again to B2B and at Nature's Fine and a bunch of other companies. And it's lowering the barriers to entry from a tech standpoint, right? But brand is obviously it's a much more nuanced thing to try to build that, and it takes a long time, as you know. But
totally,
just to play a little devil's advocate, if we think about these tech companies, I won't name names, but maybe we can start naming names. But why do they need you to do the job of large CPG multinational co? Let's say Unilever, General Mills, whomever. Why do these tech companies need to go to you to be the front end when ultimately, the larger guys have the reach and the volume to get them to where they need to go? Why work with you versus someone who already has the relationships on the shelves in all these different countries, who they historically have been like dying to work with, right?
Yeah. Naming names here, I actually don't think is the deep tech food science company side. I think it's the large multinational CPG conglomerate that we would be naming names for. And the idea is pretty simple. Two ideas. One, if you're one of these large multinational CPGs, I think they're all doing a good job of talking about how they want to get involved in the future of food. They want to build more sustainable products. And listen, I, as a citizen of this planet, hope that they are serious about that. But from a purely business standpoint, it doesn't always make a ton of sense for them. If you're a legacy brand like Oreo at Mondelez, you can do 9 digits next year by launching a new flavor of Oreo. And now somebody's saying you should really try to cannibalize your business with something that's a little bit better for your environment. That's a really big bet to make for a big public company that is difficult to pivot quickly. That's a big bet to be changing your portfolio based on the promise of this next generation of food.
Right.
Similarly, point number 2, there's just a fundamental mismatch from a strategic partnership perspective, which is what the space needs right now, between tens of thousands of employees at multinational billions of dollars in revenue CPG company and your 20, 30, 40, 50 person deep tech food science startup that's trying to move fast and figure out this next generation of food. Like there's just this fundamental mismatch between how those companies work together.
Yeah. One's on Microsoft Teams, one's on Slack or something.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now extend that analogy into every single piece of working together.
Yeah.
The lawyers involved and the expectations for who needs to be, you know, there's a million things here. And so our verdict, our sort of thesis says, we actually only care about building products with your ingredients. Like we at Tomorrow Farms actually are only successful if you, deep tech food science company, are successful. We're staking our company on your success because we think you have to be successful in order to continue to enjoy the foods that we love. These these big, like these blue chip CPG conglomerates, they don't need you to be successful. They're very happy continuing to do what they do now. It's an amazing business that they've built, an unbelievably challenging business to build.
Yeah.
But we're only going to build as far as our deep tech food science companies are making these discoveries and bringing the next generation of products to market.
Really great stuff. Really, really, really interesting. So let's talk about Bored Cow. This is your first kind of brand that you've launched under this portfolio of Tomorrow Farms, which is being branded as animal-free dairy milk. It's an interesting label we'll dive into, but let's talk about how this became like the first line that you guys started, and then how you decided to go and say, okay, we want this to be precision fermentation from Perfect Day as like the fundamental underlying technology.
Yep. So, you know, at Tomorrow Farms, I think one of the things that makes us really unique to the market is we're not tied to any single tech platform. We get to start with customer feedback. We get to start with consumer insights and decide what to build based on what the market is telling us there's opportunity for. You know, if the market tells us the next great product should be bacon, we can pull from our favorite partners building fats, textured proteins, maybe cultivated proteins, flavor systems, etc. And a similar thing happened with Perfect Day. It was sort of this perfect alignment of noticing an opportunity in fluid milk and really getting to know the Perfect Day team and the unbelievable success that they were having with fermentation-derived whey protein. You know, I met the Perfect Day team as an investor first, and started to really be impressed by how they had scaled their commercial operations. They were showing so much amazing progress in terms of being able to support partners in their endeavors to go to market with their ingredients. It felt like they had started to solve for that commercial piece better than other companies had. They were just further ahead. And so as we started to think about the opportunity in fluid milk, and as we started to talk to Perfect Day from an investment standpoint, the conversation started to veer towards, what if an external company was willing to buy a lot of your ingredient right now and send up milk, yogurt, smoothies, cream cheese on top of it? And that seemed really interesting to both of us. And so Bored Cow was sort of born out of those conversations. You know, for those who aren't familiar with the Perfect Day platform, Perfect Day is a leading precision fermentation company. You know, basic science is they're feeding the DNA sequence of cow's milk to yeast, to microflora, and letting those microflora ferment like you would ferment a beer or a loaf of bread or kombucha. And at the end of the process, what you're left with is a dairy identical, animal-free, lactose-free, and up to 97% fewer carbon emission whey protein. We at Tomorrow Farms use that whey protein in our fluid milk. We wrap that whey protein in plant-based ingredients to make a milk that looks and feels and tastes and smells and acts and cooks and froths just like real dairy milk, but has no animal, no lactose, and basically no impact on the environment. The brand here was really intentional. Not only the Bored Cow brand, but even that product identity statement that you mentioned of animal-free dairy milk. One of the conversations that we are constantly having with customers is we are branding a product with an oxymoron. At least up until the point that we launched this product, you couldn't have it be both animal-free and dairy. We get a lot of pushback from customers who are sort of oftentimes upset with us for calling something as such. But we use those words really intentionally because we genuinely believe it's the most accurate description we can give to the product. This product is real dairy. It has a real dairy identical protein at its core. If you have a dairy allergy, you cannot drink Bored Cow. And yet it is also completely animal free. And so inside Bored Cow, you're getting a fluid milk-like product, a milk alternative that we talk about can do it all. And what we mean is 8 grams per cup of dairy-identical milk protein with all the amino acids, right? The calcium and vitamin D and vitamin B that you're expecting from milk. The frothing, foaming, baking functionality that you love from milk, and sort of none of the downsides. You're getting all the sort of wholesomeness of plant-based milk at the same time. The low environmental impact, the zero lactose, etc. For us, the brand does some of that heavy lifting. Bored Cow, from a brand standpoint, tells a story that says cows have been working for us for tens of thousands of years. More recently, they've been forced into factory farming. What if instead of that, we let them retire and roam free and pursue their passions and maybe even be a little bit bored? And so we created this character-driven universe around that story that says, like, what would the cows really get up to if they no longer had to be milked for our pleasure? Because we could now get milk from fermentation rather than from cows.
Fascinating. So when you say that it's like super versatile, but like let's dive into like how this holds up against oat and almond and soy and all these other plant-based milk alternatives, right? Obviously it's closer to real milk as far as like the actual makeup of it, but we look at the penetration of those types of, I guess you could call them technologies, but 1.0 solutions that we've just rattled off. It's super high, and this is what the plant-based meat industry is striving towards because it's decades ahead, And so why do we need another one alongside these other ones that people seem to be super happy just enjoying at their local cafe or at home or however they're using it? Like what was the opportunity you think what is the void that precision fermentation as a platform and Perfect Day in particular is looking to solve when it comes to thinking about this very highly penetrated vertical within dairy?
If you've already made the switch to oat or almond milk, I think you'll like Bored Cow a lot more. And I encourage you to give it a try because I think the product's amazing and I think you'll enjoy it. The void, though, that Perfect Day solves for, the void that any precision fermentation company in the dairy space is solving for right now, and the void that we believe Bored Cow solves for long term, is those who are drinking dairy. The 90+% of the US market who are still drinking traditional dairy. And what you're solving for is the massive amount of land, water, food, etc., transportation, and more that is necessary to support that dairy nationwide. That is the market that you're actually trying to solve here. We just won't be able to, I don't believe, drink milk from cows forever. We're running out of land, we're running out of water. It's going to get more and more and more expensive to milk cows, pasteurize it, put it into our supply chains, and get it onto your supermarket shelves in the refrigerated section. What precision fermentation allows us to do is continue to enjoy the dairy products that we love, milk, but also ice cream and cream cheese, and with fermentation-derived casein coming to market, cheese and more, for many generations in the future. Here's a question for you that we've grappled with a lot. Have customer tastes changed so much that customers do not want the taste of cow's milk anymore? Meaning, of people that you know, how many actually prefer the taste of oat milk now to cow's milk? Right? Like maybe they made the switch for environmental reasons or lactose or shelf stability, whatever it might be. How many of them would actually be grossed out by the taste of cow's milk these days? If you could create your perfect dairy product, would you make it taste exactly like you did cow's milk?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that humans evolve a lot slower than the technology that's been stepping up to try to solve these problems. But I also think I think there's also the opportunity for new proteins or new types of foods to be made the same way that anything was novel at some point, right? There were certain cuisines that, that are relatively newer, or different foods that we didn't enjoy hundreds or thousands or of different centuries ago, and that are more novel. So I think there's also space for less kind of one-to-one replication and space for new foods that we haven't even thought about. But obviously those things take time too. So I think for something like milk, it's a slower evolution. I think there's also shifts away from like drinking milk, having milk with your cereal, and thinking like, why do I even need that? Like maybe I could get by with just some chia seeds and for overnight oats or something. And I don't know. It's a very emotional bundle of things to consider here, as you know, as being the front end of this.
Well, thank you for the shout out. Listen, I totally agree with you. I think it's we talk to deep tech food science companies all the time who want to put their protein into orange and apple juice, right? Like protein boosted juices in the morning is not necessarily a product that I imagined my kids drinking one day. But at the same time, you think, is there anything really wrong with it? And as you think about cultivated meat platforms, I think there's a really fascinating question that says, can you make something that's even more delicious? Can you create a new type of, right? Do we have to be branding and trying to make everything identical to what we knew in the past? What if we were just to advance and recreate and improve what was already there? That's a fascinating question to me. And I wonder how many companies will be successful rather than by trying to make ground beef, by just trying to make delicious protein sources that people love.
But for now, it seems like you're trying to be as close to the real deal as possible by saying it's just the real dairy, but without the cow. It's the same pitch as cultivated meat, saying we're going to give you the meat without the cow as well, or the chicken.
Yeah, I mean, we're going deep here, but I think the answer is yes and no. Right? Nutritionally, yes. This is dairy identical milk protein with all the amino acids. Like we were trying to give this back into your diet. Mm-hmm. But from a taste, maybe even a texture standpoint, I don't know that we're trying to get to 100%, nor am I sure that we want to be at 100%.
Right.
I think for the future of food generally right now, there's an interesting nuance that I'm seeing from companies that wave one of a lot of these technologies said, close your eyes, taste this, you'll never know it's not real beef in your burger. And the problem with making that claim is I think a lot of customers could tell. It's not that they didn't like the new product that they were trying. It's not that they didn't want to enjoy the new product. It's just that they could tell that it wasn't a real cheeseburger that they were eating.
Right.
And I think a lot of companies are making a really valuable nuance to their product messaging that says, we made something that can act a lot like the way you were using chicken cutlets in the past. And it's not going to taste exactly like a chicken cutlet, but it's going to be a delicious source of sustainable protein in your diet. And we think you really like it. And we encourage you to incorporate it into what you're doing. Bored cow can do that to some degree.
Interesting.
This is, we think, the best milk alternative out there. We think it tastes better. We think it functions better. We think the nutrition is better. We really think it is the future of dairy.
Yeah.
But we're not going to have every person who loves oat milk and every person who loves traditional dairy milk say, this is officially the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. Like, those people have different tastes. And so how can we just offer something that broadly is interesting, delicious, at the right price point, functions the way people want it, solves for the environmental challenges that our food system is facing,
Yeah.
and more.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of sampling a couple different products. So like a cookie, the chocolate milk, and different kinds of milk, and then the ice cream, all from Perfect Day. And then one of those was your milk, right? But the cookie was just their Perfect Day ingredient in the cookie, and the ice cream was theirs. I think.
What'd you think?
Their Cool House.
Yeah.
So the your milk, definitely, I didn't feel like it was 100% whole milk. So I feel better having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
It was good, right?
Yeah.
And I actually try to get whole fat milk when I order my cortados at the cafe. I'm also
Why
like
wouldn't you? It's delicious.
a bougie cafe, coffee snob.
Sure.
But yeah. So when I go to these places, I usually do it. When I drink my coffee at home, I'm not really using any dairy, but I enjoyed the chocolate milk. The regular milk, I don't drink regular milk, but like on its own, was never raised that way. But it was definitely something I could drink, but it's just not something that I would gravitate towards unless it was in a
Sure.
in a drink. And then the cookie, I couldn't really like tell the difference of the cookie. It was just like a cookie, right? And then, which is probably what you want it to be. And then the ice cream, it was like actually smoother than I would normally expect, like something that came out of like one of those like little mini pint, not a pint. It's one of those like single serving things
Mini
you would get
pint,
from
I know what you mean. Yeah.
from Ben and Jerry's, like just like a tiny little thing, which was tasty. I definitely ate it very fast, but to different consistency.
You're pointing out in both the ice cream and the whole milk example, I think one of the things that will evolve over time, and one of the reasons that we're really excited about the Tomorrow Farms platform, I think long term, one of the things that's interesting to us is, can you build products that have multiple partners or multiple quote unquote novel ingredients attached to it? Right? Like, our vision of the world is getting to a point actually where fermentation derived whey is no longer novel. It's just sort of what people expect in their dairy products. Right. But one of the gaps right now that we see is for milk fat in particular. Milk fat is what would make that mouthfeel on both ice cream and milk that it sounds like you are feeling an absence of.
Exactly.
And if you're eating premium ice cream, if you're eating or drinking, whole milk, you're of course going to be having a lot of milk fat, which is delicious.
Yeah. I'm a fatty boy, yeah.
Me too. I spend too much time thinking about food. And one of the things I think we're excited about Tomorrow Farms platform is how, can we know how to harness these ingredients better than anybody else, so you can have fermentation derived whey as the sort of building block of your milk, but also an animal free milk fat source. And by combining those, can we get even ever closer to cow's milk without needing any cow in the process?
Fascinating. Really, yeah, I know companies like Geltor, I feel like, are in this space. This is something I feel like is underappreciated, and I'm glad we brought this up, because like it is like you are trying to source all these different ingredients, and I feel like it's just a reminder that we're scratching the surface. It's not just about one particular core pillar here. There's all these other things that need to be stood up to create the whole experience, and we're just getting started, and it's only going to get better and better. So that's awesome to hear. Looking at like the broader food landscape, like what are some of the other platforms you guys are looking at? That you called precision fermentation. You made a bet there. We have a lot of other things going on, and we have also, I think we have a more leveling playing field that's playing out, where the companies that we're talking about 3 years ago having these moats around their IP and their secret microbes and whatever, I think a lot of that's falling down. But let's talk about like where do you think you want to bet for other parts of the food system? What are the other technologies you're looking at potentially getting involved with?
One of the best parts of my job is getting to know the amazing scientists that are building the next generation of great food ingredients. I sincerely believe we all need to be rooting for these brilliant scientists to solve what they're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
And I also believe that there is plenty of room for many people to be successful in this space.
Agree.
One of the best parts of my job is getting to know those companies. And, I use evaluation very broadly here because we're not thinking about it from an investor standpoint. We're thinking about it from a consumer landscape, from sort of like a commercial partner standpoint.
Right.
And so there are two types of things that we're excited about. And I'm not going to break them down on this call. We can do it another time. But there's two types of things. One is technology that we think can fundamentally shift how we're eating. That like long term, I believe this is transformational, and I'm excited about building with these companies one day. And the other is companies that fall into those categories, but also happen to be ready to commercialize.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we do talk to companies that have incredible technology that I think we need to succeed in order to continue to enjoy the foods that we love. And yet, the cost per kilogram of the protein that they're selling is not at a point yet where you can be successful from the consumer side of this equation. And so you start to narrow a bit when you think about technology that is, quote unquote, ready for prime time. Technology that is more sustainable, healthier, more nutritious than what we have used before, but also can allow us to sell a product into your everyday grocery store that is at about price parity with the products that you're buying, right? Like Tomorrow Farms, we need to build taste and price before anything else. It just doesn't work. No matter how good our brand is, no matter how tasty our product is, we're not going to win unless we can solve for those two pieces of the equation.
Yeah. Where are you, as just an aside, where are you priced right now as far as what range of and who are the parity with what kind of product?
Yeah, at Sprouts, the 1 liter unit is $5.49. So we're national with Sprouts at Board Cow, and the liter unit is $5.49. That's going to be right on par with most of your plant-based milks. I think you'll see some highly commoditized, often unbranded almond milks fall a little bit lower than that. But I think as you get to Oatly and above, premium oat milks, pistachio milks, premium almond milks, etc., you'll see them in the $5.49, $5.99, even $6.99 level. And I live in New York City, where it's not unsurprising to see those liter units go for $7.99 or more in some key stores. So pretty close to price parity right out of the gate.
And you kind of like mentioned the time horizons for these things and more on the unit economics, right? Like to get to scale in cultivated meat, it's very clear. Everybody knows that this is a very long-term bet, right? And it's got tons of hurdles. Some of them, the hurdles have been, so there's been a little bit of de-risking with like the FDA not pushing too hard, but there's still probably a lot of room. There's a long way to go before it gets to the point where it's like deemed safe, consumers like it, tastes good, and it can be offered at the right price. Yeah. And we look at stuff like that's more relies on, biomass fermentation. We look at like companies like Meaty, Nature's Find, corn, which has been around for decades. I have to keep telling this to people. Corn has been around for decades. What are your thoughts on those kind of two approaches when it comes to alt protein or like other potential platforms as well?
Yeah, I think we made a strategic decision early on at Tomorrow Farms that we were going to focus on, quote, pantry and refrigerator staples, the stuff that's in everybody's house around the country. And the reason for that is these cultivated meat companies, as an example, I think a lot of their go-to-market strategies, and I think there's starting to be public discourse around this, will be 2-3 years from now, they start to have sort of pilot scale success of their technology, and they sell in their first chicken cutlets to 3 Michelin star restaurant, right? Like, I think that the companies making foie gras and lobster will start catching up really quickly in the space, end up with a lot of these really premium, really price insensitive products sold into a really small sliver of the market. And I'm okay with that hypothetically because I understand why we might need to start there to get to sort of price parity commodity scale later on. But we made a strategic decision at Tomorrow Farms that we wanted to focus on stuff that was going to be in everyone's house. Like, foie gras does not make sense for the Tomorrow Farms portfolio, but Chips Ahoy competitor using completely upcycled ingredients makes a lot of sense for the Tomorrow Farms portfolio. Right? Like that's sort of the type of product that we're more excited about these days.
Got it. So you're giving us a little hint here. It's funny. I was just at Salt and Straw last night, and they're doing
Amazing.
this whole upcycled thing. I didn't even
So
realize.
cool. So cool. Talk about a company that like understands, their unique position to tell a story in the world and is putting their money where their mouth is. And because of how successful that company is and how delicious that ice cream is, can like make the world a little bit better by offering something like upcycled ice cream. And I don't know if you tried it, but I think any customer
Yeah.
who blindfold tasted that would never know that that was made mostly from products using side and waste streams. Like amazing. Let's do more of that.
Yeah. I did get a little taste. The one I tried was like the day old bread pudding, which is like
Yeah.
probably the
Yeah.
wrong one to like that. I think the lemon curd one would be good, but yeah, I need to do a proper taste test. I'll come back to you on that after I also go to Da Buena Planta and try Chunk Foods for the second time. Very bullish on Chunk Foods. Shout
I
out
haven't
Chunk
tried
Foods.
chunk yet, but everyone has been saying they're doing
The
something
best.
special.
The best.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. We think about, I know you're not getting into this space, but we have examples of interesting business cases like corn creating a division called Marlowe Foods where it's going to license itself as an ingredient, kind of doing a lot of the same work that you're talking about doing, right? Where they're not pivoting, but they're creating essentially, there's branching off this new line. They're saying, hey, we're open to new partnerships. Maybe the partnership could be with someone like yourself, right?
Totally.
Um, and then they, made an investment in a prime roots. It's unclear exactly what this partnership's going to look like, but they're saying that they're going to also potentially be, they're going to share IP in one way or another with prime roots to do this whole deli meat category, which is also huge. So I guess my question is like, do you see more of these companies like getting into that? I guess you're saying that Perfect Day basically did that, and that's why made you want to work with them. But like, um, do you think that we're gonna see the meaties of the world be like, oh shit, we need to actually now go B2B, and we need to create maybe a little bit of a pivot, or are you gonna see like how what is a signal to you, and like how's this gonna shake out across the alt space, alt protein,
Sure.
alt categories?
I don't know that every company is going to do it. I don't want to speak for Meaty, but I do know that I think their product is terrific. I think their brand is terrific. And every person from the Meaty team that I've ever interacted with also seems terrific. And that's a pretty good equation for success there. But I think that we're going to see a lot of companies go down the sort of go-to-market strategy that Corn is now going down. We met Perfect Day and they were doing some great work with the Urgent Company, but generally we're still pitching themselves as Intel Inside for the dairy industry.
Mm.
And I think that's fantastic. I think that's a huge opportunity for companies. There's one takeaway from business school strategy class. It's like focus on what you're good at. It's
Yeah.
like don't get pulled in too many directions.
Right.
And there's a reason I run Tomorrow Farms and not Perfect Day.
Right.
Like that is a different skill set than what I think I am good at and what I bring to the market. And so
Yeah.
I think we will see a lot of companies go that direction. I think we need amazing, thoughtful, low-cost ingredient suppliers like hopefully Corn will be, like I think Perfect Day can be, who can supply their amazing transformative ingredients to companies to build better products and brands. And at Tomorrow Farms, we want to build the next Unilever, but we want it to be one that is really focused on being kinder to animals and easier on the planet and better for our bodies. Let's just reinvent our favorite foods and let's take advantage of this incredible inflection point in our food system where we now have access to these technologies.
Awesome. And when we talk about access, we have to talk about the grocery shelves and breaking open that can of worms. So, as a startup in your own right, what are some of the challenges that you're up against when you're talking about the current grocery distribution system here? And then, like, what's that like, kind of when you're trying to champion these new brands on behalf of these ingredient companies? And then, what's that like once you've gotten there? Let's talk about driving trial and like how
Sure.
the D2C component plays in. But I guess that's a two-part question. But like, start with
Sure.
the challenges and then maybe talk about like how you've kind of solved solved for them cleverly as a nimble, startup?
Sure. So on the first challenge, if we were just making a new protein bar, or we thought we had a delicious kettle cooked potato chip, even that is a really difficult thing to sell into grocery stores. You're up against much better funded CPG companies that can offer higher slotting fees, deeper discounts, more opportunities for whatever type of support these grocery stores want from you. And it's really hard to get them to switch whatever product is on their shelf for one that is untested. That 0 to 1 challenge is extremely difficult for any company, no matter the product that you're selling. Now, our challenge is compounded by the fact that we are calling them up and offering them brand new product categories with very little analog for them to use for our future success.
Right.
Not only are we asking them to give a new emerging brand a try, we're also asking them to give a new emerging category a try. We're not saying we've got a really nice brand and taste on our almond milk. We're saying we have a milk you've never seen before, and this should be on your shelf. And so at Tomorrow Farms, that's what we spend a lot of our time thinking about these days. We spend a lot of time building those relationships with key retailers, giving them insight into what's in our pipeline, even working collaboratively with those companies so they can feel like they're a part of this journey and that they have a say in what comes next in the Tomorrow Farms portfolio. We've also raised venture money against the idea that we have to be successful in retail for this to work long term, so that we can go toe to toe with some of those players up front. Once you're on the shelf, though, now you have the challenge of selling that new product and new category to customers. Right?
Yeah.
Like, now you've gotten past the grocery category manager, and now you've got to get the customer to do it.
Right.
This playbook is evolving for us, and it's something that has been really fun to learn and grow as a team. We have an amazing internal team who's leading a lot of that work that I'm very, very proud of. But it includes in-store demoing and merchandising. It includes our social media intentions and platforms and the story that we can tell there. It often includes coupons and other promos to drive people to specific stores. You're trying to be creative with the opportunity to get people to taste your product once. We feel confident that if we do so, customers will keep coming back. Right? The reason for setting up this company is we think we can make better products and brands, but we've got to get people to try it. And so all of those sort of post-on-shelf efforts are focused on getting people to give our product a try because we feel so confident about them coming back if they do.
And you started D2C, right, before you even hit Sprouts?
Yeah, we did. We made a pitch to investors early on that said, listen, we're not going to try to drive crazy revenue direct to consumer. Right? Like, we're never going to be successful shipping milk across the country direct to consumer. But we think we can gather a lot of really invaluable feedback from customers by doing that. Right? We can almost start to treat food like a software. We can sort of ship something and understand how they engage with it and make updates and iterate on it very quickly while we still have the chance, because it's much harder to do once you're in a national rollout with a big grocery store. And so we spent a few months as a quote unquote direct to consumer company, physically calling customers. Like, someone orders it, you're going to get a call from us a few days later to ask what you think about it.
Awesome. As we come out towards the end of the convo, I'd love for you to just give us some very broad stroke kind of projections, predictions. What sort of trends do you see consumers, gravitating towards when it comes to how they're cooking, where they're eating out and what they're ordering when they're eating out, what kind of foods they're going to be gravitating towards, and like kind of their values, at least in the US, like when it comes to sustainability and health. Like, I think this is very different here than it is over abroad in Europe. I think they're a lot more forward thinking. But where do you see this heading in the next decade?
I'll try to keep this brief, and I in the interest of time. I remember a time not long ago encountering oat milk for the first time and being really confused by what that meant and how you could have milk from oats. Like, I remember friends joking about how you milk almonds. When it first came out, that wasn't that long ago. And think about the trajectory that we've seen over those 10 years to just how commonplace those products are now and how unquestioned that oat milk or almond milk is in everyone has that in their pantry or refrigerator at this time. And I think we're about to see that exact same inflection point for a lot of these novel technologies. Our goal with Bored Cow is largely to make it so that fermentation-derived protein is normalized, that you are not surprised by it, that you are actually excited by it, that you are understanding of it, and that it is commonplace, that it is not something that makes you look again, that you have a bunch of animal-free dairy milks on the shelf and you have a favorite one, just like you might have a favorite oat or almond milk. And I think that's the trajectory that I see right now. If I had to give one prediction, it's that customers just get much more comfortable with these technologies, that they become more commonplace, and that we hear less about it feels lab grown, because it's not. Fermentation derived whey is made in cylindrical tanks like your beer is made from your favorite local microbrewery. Precision fermentation is the same technology that we use to make the rennet in most of our hard cheeses, or the insulin that everyone has a family member or friend uses. And I think that I see these technologies becoming much more commonplace, in some ways more commoditized, much more acceptable, and also much more ubiquitous in our food system.
This has been a great convo, really head scratching and eye opening. So thank you for that. If we have a lot of different people tuning in here, so if anyone wants to get in touch from, like, let's say the brand side, they want to, or the technology partnership side, or people that want to come work for you, if you're hiring, those kinds of things, now's your time to kind of plug away, and consumers where they can find you on the shelves, most importantly.
So
I think
for Bored Cow, you can find us national at Sprouts, a few other retailers launching nationally soon, which we're very, very excited about. But keep an eye on our social channels for that. You can always find us at Try Bored Cow, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And I think our social channels are a lot of fun for Bored Cow. And then at the Tomorrow Farms level, if you're interested in thinking about what's next for our platform and pipeline, and working with deep tech food science and advancing the future of food, you can find us at tomorrowfarms.co.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this awesome conversation about the future of food. I'm really excited to see how this all plays out, and really love the approach. So thank you again.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure.